Greetings, peeps, and welcome to the second week of class. I hope things are going well for you. And I thought it might be a good idea to sort of give a little series of mini lectures pertaining to the chapters that we're going to be covering, and in this case, chapters 2 and 3. Part of the reason for me wanting to talk with you about this is, in online courses, we don't get face-to-face time. So I don't have the opportunity to stand up in front of the class and discuss what it is that we're talking about, what we're reading about. So let's just briefly discuss a couple of things, and then you are free to give me your feedback if you wish, or we're going to have a discussion topic about this very thing. So you can sort of pontificate, if you like, on our discussion topic. But the bottom line to all this, folks, is think about what the headings of the chapters are, the next two chapters, chapters 2 and 3. Chapter 2, what is a work of art? And chapter 3, being a critic of the arts. Well, okay, chapter 2, what is a work of art? Well, I think just about everybody would agree that that's a very difficult question to answer, not only in the literal sense, but also in the conceptual sense, right? Which is one of the things we're being asked to do, how we perceive, how we conceive of what a work of art is and how we evaluate it, essentially. A work of art could be anything, really. And you've probably heard people say, hey, that dinner was a work of art, or wow, that car is a work of art, or referencing just about anything that we can see, we can touch, maybe even what we can hear. From my standpoint, a lot of music could be considered a work of art, and actually, I guess I should qualify that more by saying, all music to me is art. So. I guess the main reason I bring this point up to you is that these questions you're being asked are really and truly, what do you think type questions. They are not questions that have specific or right or wrong answers. How can you possibly correctly answer what a work of art is? It's just all too subjective, right? I think everyone would agree with me on that. And even if we were to agree on that, we would still have disagreements about what we think individually a work of art is. You get two people together and they're not going to see something in the same way. If you've ever been to an art museum, you may have experienced this on your own. And I encourage you, if you ever have the opportunity, to take a ride down to Detroit, to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in Detroit. It's a fantastic museum, many wonderful works of art there. But I don't ask you to go just so you can either criticize it or make a definition as to what a work of art is or not. I would ask you to go just for the experience alone. If you have the opportunity, yeah, it's a great experience. It doesn't mean that you have to. It doesn't mean that if you don't go, you're any less of a human being, or you're any less intelligent, or anything along those lines. I would say the same thing to anybody who might have an opportunity to attend the symphony, or if you've never attended an opera. I know you mention opera and everyone kind of goes screaming. But honestly, if you have, and I would say the same thing about any type of rock concert, any type of band, any type of concert. If you've never had the opportunity, how can you possibly, if you've never experienced it, how can you possibly evaluate it, right? I mean, I think you would agree. I've never met you face to face. How could I possibly evaluate you? All I see are your comments. All I see are what you write about, right? That's my only perception of you. There's no way for me to truly say, what kind of individual you are, what kind of human being you are, unless I get to know you on a more intimate level. And sadly, we don't have that opportunity, on online courses, but it's kind of interesting. You do kind of get a different insight and a different take on people. So these questions that come up on what is a work of art, again, I must stress, these are what do you think type questions. How do you perceive? What do you perceive as a work of art? And believe me, there are works of art that you may recoil from. You may say, that isn't a work of art, that's disgusting. Why would I look at that? Why would I have that hanging in a museum? Or why would I have that hanging in my home? Or why would I put that sculpture out on my coffee table? Or, why would I listen to that? That's not art. So think about it in those terms. Remember, there is no right or wrong. There is no definitive. It's simply, what do you think? And I think this course really, you have to take a look at the course Humanities Through the Arts. The title of the course is designed to get people to experience the humanities through the arts, right? You experience the humanities every time, you talk with another individual, every time you witness the architecture of a building, every time you read a book, every time you watch a play, every time you see a film that you like. So your interpretations, right? Your own individual interpretations are of what is most important. So, and that brings us to chapter 3, being a critic. Being a critic of the arts. Well, what is a critic? Now you take that word critic, right? What does that mean, right? If you're going to critique, as the French say, something, it means you're going to offer some type of constructive commentary that points out good and bad. If you're only giving good points, if you're only giving positives about something, in my mind, in my experience, that's not really critiquing. That's only giving me the positives. I want the negatives as well. So, and I guess part of that is because as human beings, obviously, we're going to see good and bad in everything, right? We're going to see what's good, we're going to see what's bad. We may not always bring it out, we may not always point it out. And we certainly, I'm guilty of this myself, we allow our environment, the people that are around us, to influence how we critique art or music or however you want to look at it. Think about the number of times you may have discussed, either with family or friends, a series that you've seen on Netflix or some other streaming service, and I hated that series, or I really love that series, and then you get into the whys, right? And everybody has a different why. Everybody has a different why. I mean, you might hear people say things like, it was really well written, or I love the cinematography, or I really like this actor. There are, limitless reasons why we might like or dislike. So critiquing has to be an evaluatory process. Well, I jump back a little bit and I say, how can you possibly critique something if you've never experienced it? However, often we will make critiques, right? We will criticize something on first sight. And I think that's another, just another part of human nature. We tend to immediately evaluate something on first sight, and we either say yes or no. We either like it or we dislike it. Well, that's kind of judgmental rather than being critical, right? It's, again, that word criticism. If we don't allow ourselves to experience it, we're never really going to have the knowledge base to fully criticize, I think, or to fully critique, if you will, or evaluate. So think about criticism or critiquing or being a critic of the arts as being an evaluator of the arts. This means that you're put in a position of observation, and you are your own human nature, your own character is what is driving the force behind your evaluatory process. And you are making the decisions as to whether something is good or something is bad. Now, it doesn't mean that your definitive critique, right, is going to set the world on fire. I mean, in some cases, depending upon who you are, that actually does happen. Think about, the reviews of movies, of films, things like that. Or I get into tech vids a lot, and watching the reviews and the evaluation process of new technologies, particularly microphones and sound equipment, keyboards, phones, right? I just recently got a new phone, a Z Fold 4, and it took me months to make the decision to get it. Watching vids, watching how other people, what they say, what they talk about it. So sometimes you need a collective assessment, right? You can't just go on your own. You got I want to look at what other people have said, and there's nothing wrong with that. So when you consider these works of art, and when you consider what it means to be a critic of the arts, remember, again, it is a very subjective process. It is not one-sided. It is not something that you can just simply say, oh yes, this is it, or oh no, this is not it. And in one of the cases in your book, you're being asked to evaluate a very famous painting, The Last Supper. And you're being asked to critique it in a way of structure, right? You're being asked to look at it in the way of how it is structured and how does it relate to angular lines and things like that. Well, I say this in just a minute when we look at the assignment description, but folks, you may not see it that way. You may not view it that way at all. And I have to bring this up. Suppose you're blind. What if you're blind and you cannot physically see the art? Does that make it any less valuable? And does that make your opinion of it any less valuable? I say no. I say no. Everyone's opinion counts. Everyone's opinion is valuable, depending upon their senses, depending upon how they perceive what we might call a work of art. So I hope everyone understands that I'm not after you giving correct answers, right? I mean, obviously, if it's a yes or no question, yeah, I suppose you have a 50-50 chance. But if you answer contrarily to what you might think is right, just give a reason why. I don't see it that way. Well, tell me why. Why don't you see it that way? Think about it. Think about your answers. Don't just simply write what you think I want to hear or what you think might be the right answer. Be definitive. Think about what you're doing. Okay, so let's talk just a little bit about the assignment process and a couple of things that I'm noticing. I've noticed only a very few people have attempted the assignments. Now I realize and I'm not trying to push or rush anyone. We have until that last date, right, the 15th of August, and you've got plenty of time, and that's one of the reasons why I do it. But understand, these assignments will pile up if you don't look at them, if you don't do the readings, if you don't do the assignments. It's all going to pile up. Now, if you're the type of person you can let everything go until the last minute, and you're going to try to do the day before they're due, do it all in one day, that's your bailiwick, But if that creates a problem, and then you come to me the day of the due date and say, I messed up, I forgot, they're due. Well, I'm sorry about that, okay? This is on you. You've been given ample notice. You've been given a detailed course calendar. You know when things are due. You are responsible for your own work and in the time frame that you do it. That's why I do it this way. It's summer. No one wants to be chained to their desk, right? No one wants to be chained to homework. I get it. It's summer for me too, folks. But I'm asking you, okay? Take the time. It doesn't take really very long to do these assignments. Honestly, again, they're what do you think questions. And you could do them, sort of over time if you want, and keep track of them and then turn them in whenever you want. But you gotta do them, okay? So please don't wait until August 14th, the day before they're due, to try to do everything in that one day. Please, I beg of you, make it easier on yourself. Okay, so I have received a couple of emails regarding some questions about the assignments. Apparently, there's a little bit of confusion as to what to do. Let me just say this up front. You're going to hear me say this again in just a moment. But if it's not in the assignment description, right? If you go to those assignment Dropbox or however you get there, when you click on that link, if it's not in there, you don't have to do it. Okay? So if you see something in the book that says perception key questions, but you don't see those same perception key questions in the assignment, you don't have to do them. Okay? You have to do the readings. That's utmost important. You've got to read those chapters because that's where the information is. That's where you've got to read those chapters because that's where the knowledge base is. Okay, so one more thing, in case I didn't mention it, I know you've been waiting for this next podcast to come up, the first podcast actually, which is actually it's a rebroadcast of a podcast. It's really short, and I will have some specific things for you to address, like perception key questions, but they're going to be related directly to the podcast. Each podcast you're going to view is going to be like this, and you're going to be asked to do some evaluations, some critiques, things like that. Nothing extensive, so don't worry, don't be alarmed. And they're not too long, so I think you'll enjoy them, and I will look forward to reading your discussions when we have them into discussion topics. But for now, let's just take a look at your assignments in detail and how to interpret the assignments for chapters 2 and 3, and how to look at them as far as what is being expected of you to do on our e-learning site. Okay, so hope all of this is helpful to you, and we'll talk again soon. Okay, folks, so let's take a look at these next set of questions for chapters 2 and chapters 3. So first and foremost, once again, you log on to the site. This is what you see. You're going to want to go over to either the Contents tab or the Activities tab. It does not matter which. You can access the assignment drop boxes from either location. But let's start this time by going to Assignment Dropboxes underneath the Activities tab. Okay, so here you have all the assignments listed, right? You have introductions, you have all the stuff that we have been talking about so far. But let's get into section 2, which deals with chapters 2 and 3. So if you click on that, you see here is the all the questions that you are being asked to do. Now, these are the guidelines. So, for example, in your reading, you may see different questions. Well, if you don't see the questions in the readings here, then you don't have to do them. So I hope I've made that clear. Let's take a look at the text. And again, I urge you, keep 2 tabs open on your browser so that you can just switch back and forth. So let's go back to chapter 2, and let's take a look at what we're talking about with respect to different perception key questions. So chapter 2 is asking the question, what is a work of art? And so let's take a look, for example, at this first set of perception key questions. Well, it's asking, there's 4 questions here, but take a look here. None of those are right here. It says, after you've read the required sections in chapter 2, answer the following questions that are taken from the conception key questions. Well, notice how that's in quotations. It's because we're taking a conceptual or perceptual look at art ourselves. So you don't have to answer any of these. skip ahead to where it's talking about the questions that you are being asked to answer. And for that, you're going to need to scroll down. Now, this is to get you to read. You've got to read this information. You've got to look at the works of art that they're talking about, whether you consider them to be works of art or not. Well, that's a debatable question, obviously, and that's one of the reasons for the chapters that we're looking at right now. You'll notice here, this is on page 17 of our text, it says perception key, Adams and Goya. Well, let's go back to our assignment. What does it say here? Adams and Goya. Choose any 3 of the 10 questions to answer. And please to remember to indicate which questions you're answering by their number. So if you choose to answer question number 3, question number 5, and question number, 7, then you just put those in the beginning of your answer so that I know those are the questions that you are answering. And then cartoon panel, answer question only. Well, you've got to find where that cartoon panel is. Well, in order for you to do that, you should have been reading, and so you should know right where to go to where that cartoon panel is located and where you can find the questions that deal with it. Notice I'm not asking you to look at Adams and Goya Revisited. I don't need you to look at that. If you see anything that is not in the assignment, you do not need to answer it. But you do need to find that cartoon panel that they're talking about. Here's another one about Adams and Goya and Carter. No, that is not for you to answer. They're great questions. It doesn't mean that I don't think they're important. It just means they don't really pertain to what we're looking at. We need to come down here to this cartoon panel and the perception key questions that deal with it. Okay? And so if we look under cartoon panel, it says answer question 2 only. Well, that's all you got to do. Take question number 2 and answer it, please. Then we have this Artemisia Gentileschi, the self-portrait. That's not in your questions, right? Is it? Yes, it is. It says answer question number 7 only. Okay? So I'm trying to be as explicit and explanatory as I can. Then you have something called 10 female nudes. You can read all of this yourself, look at the arts all yourself, but here are the perception key questions for the 10 female nudes. And it says, please choose any 3 of the 5 questions to answer. Now, I realize it says there are 7 questions here, so just go ahead and choose 3 of the 7, okay? Don't worry about it if there are more questions than you need to answer. And then after that, we move on to chapter 3. So once we get past the summary section, I do encourage you to read this summary because it does contain info that may be important to you with respect to answering some of these perception key questions. Okay, so here we are. Being a critic of the arts. Now, what is a critic of the arts? Well, we talked about that just a little bit. You can answer that specific question in your perception key questions. Now, this first set says 3 kinds of criticism. Okay, well, you'll notice there isn't anything in here about the 3 kinds of criticism. Now, I'm deliberately leaving this one out because I'm going to have you criticizing, in a way, the things that you're listening to musically and relating them to artwork. So don't panic, but look at what this is talking about. Descriptive criticism, which is, of course, one of the 3 kinds. And then look here. Here is your first set of questions. It says perception key, the Last Supper. What does this say? Describe the symmetry, if you detect any. Describe how the lines tend to meet in the landscape behind Christ's head. Well, you can take a look at this drawing, but you may not see it that way. If that is the case, if you feel that you don't see what they're talking about, then just write that. Just say, I do not see symmetry the way it's described in our book. If that's how you feel about it, that's how you feel about it. Remember always, these are not hard and fast rules. There is no right or wrong here. These are perception key questions, how you perceive the art that you're looking at. Okay? Now, let's take a look at a couple of other things here. We have something in a perception key called the detail and structural dominance. Okay. Well, what are they asking? It says, in the Last Supper, do you find that detail or structure relationships dominate or are equal? And then number 2, whether detail or structure relationships dominate or are equal often varies, blah, 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 blah. There you go. Those are specific questions that's asking you to answer. You will notice that if you look at this here, it says, in the Last Supper, do you find number 2, whether detail or structural. Okay, so there's the 2 questions. You answer those 2 questions, okay? Then we move on into interpretive criticism. Notice they give you some examples of architecture of both modernistic and perhaps what you might consider classical. Now we're talking about Le Corbusier and Sullivan. Excuse my French. My French is terrible, but anyway, I think that's pretty close. Anyway, it's those are the questions you're being asked to answer. Choose any one of the 5 questions, and please remember to indicate which one you're answering. And then we have something about a poem here. Now, I had the incorrect author's name earlier, and if you already answered the question, don't worry about it. It's not going to affect you. It's still asking. I want you to answer question 2. So all is good there. Don't worry if you answered it while it said Yeats' poem. Don't worry about it. It's all good. Then evaluative criticism. Choose one of the 2 questions to answer. So that's all you got to do. Here it is, evaluative criticism. There's 2 questions. You answer one of them. And the sensation show. Answer only question 4. Only question 4. So again, this is all what do you think type of questions. And of course, at this point, once we're down to the end of this page, we're on to the summary, and then we're ready to go into the next chapter. Okay, so I hope that has clarified for you. If it is not in, okay, if it doesn't ask you to do it here, then you don't do it. But if it says, answer the questions, and it gives you gives you the topic of the perception key, then you need to answer all of those questions they ask there. In this particular set of chapters, I give you very specific questions to answer, and I ask you to indicate which ones that you choose if I leave that choice up to you. Okay, so hopefully that is a little bit more self-explanatory with respect to how to complete these assignments. I'm assuming that each of you knows now to submit in this box down here. Once you've typed your answers and you've edited and made things the way you want them, you just click that submit button. Okay, so we'll be seeing you soon. Love makes me treat you the way that I do. Gee, baby, ain't I good to you? There's nothing too good for a girl that's so true. Gee, baby, ain't I good to you? I bought you a fur coat for Christmas, a diamond ring, a Cadillac car, and everything. Love makes me treat you the way that I do.